the event of this evening. Before we go into the program proper, I have a couple of announcements. After listening to our speaker tonight, we're going to have a reception at 100 UV, and everybody is welcome. We want to show the traditional African hospitality to our guest speaker and to all those who have been able to make it to this event. I'm now going to proceed to introduce our speaker. The person we're going to listen to tonight is a man that is able to communicate with both terrestrial and celestial elements. So be ready to hear a lot of things. He knows the language of humans, and he knows the language of those who inhabit the celestial realm. Dr. Kofi Opoku comes to us tonight from Ghana. He's currently a visiting professor at University of Northern Iowa in the Department of Religion. He had his education at the University of Ghana, at Yale University, and University of Bonn in West Germany. He has traveled extensively, both in the Americas and in different parts of the world. A number of times he's been a visiting scholar to reputable universities in the US and indeed all over the world. And there's no doubt that he carries that experience. He brings that experience with him here tonight. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a real full basket of food for thought. I'm not going to waste your time too much. Please welcome Dr. Kofi Opoku.
Thank you very much, Dele. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I would like first of all to thank all those who made it possible for me to be here. There's a long list of names that I could mention, but for the sake of time, I'll just mention a few and say thank you to Mike Warren for being instrumental in getting me here, and Dele and the African students. I also want to say thank you to my friend Lee for driving me all the way from Cedar Falls to this place. I am reminded on this occasion of a story about a preacher, and I'm not a preacher, so don't be anxious, who prepared what he thought was a very good sermon and mounted the pulpit to preach. And in the course of his sermon, one of his most prominent parishioners walked out of the sanctuary. He was very upset, but he managed to stumble through his sermon to the end. After the service, he went to the parishioner's wife and asked her, "Did I say anything to offend your husband?" And the lady said, "Oh, no, you didn't. My husband has a habit of walking in his sleep." I do hope that what I have to say tonight does not put you to sleep. And secondly, that I do not give the sleepwalkers among you the opportunity to identify themselves. I usually begin my presentations with 4 African proverbs. And I like to do the same tonight. As we say, proverbs are the daughters of experience, and a proverb is the horse which can very quickly carry you to the discovery of ideas. And the 4 proverbs are as follows. One must come out of one's house to begin learning. One must come out of one's house to begin learning. 2, If you have not been outside of your home, you do not say your mother's soup is the best. There are many people who have never left their homes and still claim that their mother's soup tastes the best. The third proverb has to do with truth. Sometimes it has to do with wisdom or knowledge. But the proverb says, truth is like a baobab tree, and one person's arms cannot embrace it. In other words, every culture, every person's arms are too short to embrace the totality of truth. If we are to come anywhere near an understanding of truth, we virtually have to hold hands with each other. And the last one, hunt in every forest, for there is wisdom and good hunting in all of them. This proverb admonishes openness, or espouses openness, looking at every culture, because there is wisdom and good learning in every single cultural tradition. Knowledge about Africa, which we have at the moment, to a large extent has come from the pens and writings of non-African people. And so there has developed an age-old tendency to look at Africa through the eyes of non-Africans. An African proverb says, until the lions have their historians, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. And until African people themselves begin to interpret themselves and their culture and their traditions, all the tales will glorify the non-African writers. Despite the undoubted cultural diversity which you find in Africa, a very painstaking comparative study of African cultures reveals an underlying affinity which runs through the beliefs, customs, value systems, socio-political systems, and practices of various African societies. And from such studies as have been already made of the religious beliefs, practices, and rites of various African communities, it is possible to discern common religious ideas and assumptions about the universe which are held throughout Africa and which provide a worldview which may be described as African. This worldview comes through the myths, legends, proverbs, rituals, symbols, and beliefs. The African worldview, or view of the universe, or all existing things, including the earth, the heavens, the galaxies, and all therein regarded as a whole, is the result of centuries of experience and mature reflection upon these experiences and the world at large. Since no human society can exist without some form of specific perception or interpretation of the world in which it lives, African people too generated their own ideas concerning their understanding of the world as they went through life's experiences and reflected upon the meaning of these experiences, not only those related to the changes in individual lives, but also those related to the seasons, characterized by certain occupations, festivities, or crops, and also changes in the environment. All these ideas became crystallized into a system of thought which was not static and was passed down from generation to generation, not only orally, but also symbolically and ritually. And even when it was passed on orally, our ancestors left a proverb which says, when a person dies, his or her tongue does not rot. It is in the worldview of African people that one finds the key to the understanding of how Africans evaluate life, both in its temporal and non-temporal dimensions. And it is this system of thought made up of the concept of the supernatural, the human person and society, nature, and of the way in which these concepts form a system that gives meaning and significance to human lives and action. According to African thought, the supernatural and the natural, the human person and society, and in fact all things exist in dynamic correspondence, whether they are visible or not. The universe, which consists of visible and invisible realities, did not come into existence on its own volition, but was brought into being or created by a creator who goes by very many names throughout the continent. The creator is the great weaver, or Mwari, in Zimbabwe. He is Namakungwe in Zambia. In Zaire, the same creator is Ebangala, which means the beginner. And in Ghana, the creator is called Bori Bori, or hewer, or excavator, or originator. And from these names and appellations, it is clear that the universe had its beginning and origin from a creator. That everything which exists was created by the creator is the most fundamental assumption in African cosmology, and to African people it is a statement which is accepted to be true and which does not require proof or demonstration. Although the universe had a clear beginning, there is no indication of an end to it in African cosmological thought. This is because the universe is sustained by the Creator, also known as the one who bears the world, Mebe in the Bulu language of the Cameroons, or the Supreme Protector, Egbesu in the Igbo language, or in the Ijo language, or Osebulua in the Igbo language. The Creator, Bearer, Protector, and Upholder is eternal, and the act of upholding the universe is also an unending, eternal activity of the Creator. Since the Creator sustains the universe, there is no thought that it will end, and the Bambuti of the Congo say, if God should die, the world would collapse, and the Igbo add that if the Creator removes his hands, the world will end. There is a widespread view that the Creator continues to create, and thus creation is going on all the time and did not stop with the original creation at the beginning of time in the dim past. It is not only creation which is unending, time itself is also unending, and in terms of space also, the universe has no ending, for there is no part of the universe which may be called its boundary or edge. In terms, therefore, of both time and space, the universe has no ending. This idea of an unending universe is no mere theoretical assertion for African people, for in the African cultural tradition, there are many rituals which depict or reflect this belief. Festivals, rituals, and ceremonies reenact the unending nature of the universe. And life itself is a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, a rhythm which is in conformity with the reality of the universe. John Mbiti expressed this idea in the following words. The idea that the universe has no ending is also depicted in rituals and art forms by African peoples. For example, the drawing of snakes with their tails in their mouths symbolize the unending universe. There are many rituals all over Africa which enact and celebrate the rhythm of birth, death, and rebirth. Thus, in African views, the universe is permanent, unending, and eternal. The Creator sustains it. There is no reason to imagine that it will ever end, let alone how such an ending would come about, as the universe is sustained by God, who himself is everlasting. End of quote. The universe is characterized by order, not chaos. And there are orders which undergird it and which have their source in the Creator. Nature has its own order which regulates events in the world of nature and is fairly predictable. The seasons follow each other in an orderly fashion. After the dry season comes the rain, and the farmers prepare the land by clearing the forest and burning the trees in anticipation of the farming season. Night follows day, and the sun rises and sets each day. In the life of human beings, one is born a child, grows into puberty and adulthood, marries, gives birth to children, grows old and dies, and returns to the land of spirits, and is reborn to begin a new cycle of life, which is to say that the life cycle is renewable. The existence of this order enables African people to plan their lives, when to hold their festivals, when to farm, and when to perform certain ceremonies. The existence of this order also helps to give a sense of security and certainty. There is a moral order which is believed to have been instituted by the Creator, who is believed to be against evil. And it is this moral order which regulates the life of human beings in societies and is the source of the prohibitions, the taboos, customs, regulations, and laws, notions of right and wrong, truth and falsehood, as well as what is beautiful and what is ugly, all of which go to make life in society livable and tolerable. It is this moral order which is the basis of the notion of obligation, which is fundamental to the structure of African society. African values are also formulated on the basis of the moral order. And there are a number of proverbs which express values in African societies, all of which come from this moral order. If your parents take care of you up to the time you cut your teeth, you take care of them when they lose theirs. And to reflect the value of truth, the proverb says, truth washes the hands cleaner than soap. All the detergents from Johnson & Johnson cannot clean your hands better than truth can. Or if you travel with fraud, you may reach your destination but will be unable to return. The upkeep of the moral order is not the responsibility of human beings alone. Spiritual beings, such as the Supreme Being and the ancestors, as well as the divinities, are also keenly interested in morality, and offenses which escape human detection are believed to be punished by spiritual beings. There is an Akan name for the Supreme Being, which, when translated into English, means the one who sees all, even that which is behind, refers to the Creator as a judge who sees everything, even that which is behind. And the East African name, the Great Eye, also conveys the same idea. There is also a religious order in the universe, which is clearly indicated by the belief that the universe was in fact created, and that the Supreme Being and other spirits are actively engaged in the life of human beings and in nature as well. Since everything was created by the Creator controls everything in the universe, or sometimes some of the Creator's agents act on his behalf. There is also a mystical order, an order of mysterious or hidden power which is at work in this universe, and this power is tapped for both good and evil purposes. Herbalists, rainmakers, diviners, and all those who do good for society are believed to tap this power for the good they do for society. But witches and sorcerers and the others who inflict injury and harm on society also tap this source for what they are able to do. But all these orders take their source from the Creator, who is the originator and ruler of the universe. African ontology distinguishes 5 categories of being. These are the Supreme Being, the spirits, which include ancestral spirits and spirits in nature, divinities, and so on. Then there are human beings, followed by the physical world of natural objects and phenomena, and lastly, a power or an energy to which reference has already been made, which permeates the whole universe. The distinctive feature of this ontology is that it is hierarchical, and all the 4 categories are contingent upon the first, which is the absolute ground of being. Furthermore, implicit in this hierarchical character of the ontology is that a higher entity has the power to control a lower one. The ontology is essentially spiritualistic. What is essentially, or in the first place, spirit, although this does not imply a denial of the reality of the non-physical, non-spiritual, empirical world. Now, according to what most Westerners are used to thinking, perception alone shapes reality, but the African cultural tradition shows clearly that perception is only one type of reality. There is a reality beyond the the human senses. And if we want to examine this from a purely scientific perspective, it is obvious that what you and I perceive with the senses is merely a small segment of what actually exists. The question of the origin of the Supreme Being in the ontology, the first category in the ontological structure, is not raised, for not only does such an inquiry amount to a lack of courteous regard, but it is also futile. The Supreme Being is the beginner, uncreated, and has been there now as from ancient times, as some of the translation of the name show, and it indicates that the Supreme Being is the one beyond whom there is nothing. All other powers take their source from the Supreme Being, and the Supreme Being remains the explanation of the origin of the universe and the powers within it which human beings recognize. The Supreme Being is essentially a spirit, and there are no visual representations. The unique position of the Supreme Being in African thought is evidenced by the equally unique names, always in the singular, and there are attributes given to the Supreme Being which are not shared by other spiritual beings. The Supreme Being also does not have a generic name, such as the gods who may be called Orisha or divinities. Knowledge of the Supreme Being is believed to be immediate and self-evident. There is an Akan saying that one does not have to point the Supreme Being to a child. Moreover, every person is believed to have a direct access to the Supreme Being without the assistance of priests or priestesses. The ancestors are the next most important spiritual beings, and they constitute the supernatural or extra-human dimension of society. To die does not mean to cease to exist. Rather, death is the necessary channel through which one must pass in order to join the ancestors who live in the abode of the dead. Death, therefore, does not end life. It is a transition from one stage to the other. Between life and death, there are no breaks. The opposite of life is not, the opposite of death is not life. The opposite of death is birth, because just as birth takes away from human society, birth makes up for the ravages inflicted upon human society by death. Since death is only a transition, the dead continue their lineage affiliations. Human relations, therefore, remain unbroken, and the dead, the living and the yet unborn form an unbroken family. The dead have their obligation to the living, and the living have an obligation to the dead. It is the obligation of the dead to protect and guard the living from harm and to oversee the conduct of the family and lineage members. The living, for their part, venerate the dead and invoke them through libations to participate in the affairs of the community. The living also show their hospitality and kindness to the dead by giving them food and drink and keeping their traditions and naming children after them. The dead are also honored because after death they enter into a spiritual state of existence and live very closely to the Supreme Being. And since each person possesses a part of the Supreme Being in him or her, one can understand how the dead can be said to continue to live after death, because the part of the Supreme Being in them goes back to live forever. Another way of coming to some understanding of the continued belief in the existence of the dead arises from mythology, or the mythology which explains how human beings were formed. One mythology puts it that at the beginning of time, what is now the earth was simply a huge drop of milk. Milk contains life, and it tells you where the myth originated. And the Creator came and turned the milk into stone. And out of the stone came iron, and out of the iron came fire, and out of the fire came water, and out of the water came air. And the Creator came a second time and put all the 5 elements together and created a human being. Death, therefore, is not an annihilation. Death is simply a reabsorption into the existing elements out of which human beings have come or have been made. Death, therefore, ceases to be an ontological disaster. The gods, or Orisha, are also essentially spirits, but are credited with personalities like those of human beings. They were created to fulfill specific functions, and as creatures, they are neither independent nor co-eternal with the Supreme Being. A divinity is but a mouthpiece or a messenger or an agent of the Supreme Being. A divinity may also be an intermediary between the Supreme Being and human beings. These gods or divinities are included in the pantheon of each community and are clearly distinguishable from the Supreme Being, who is outside the pantheon as its creator. There are many stories, many myths, which explain how limited the divinities are. According to one Yoruba story, the god of the sea, Olokun, one day challenged Olorun to a contest, the Supreme Being, to see which of the two could outdress the other. When the time for the contest came, Olorun sent his messenger, the chameleon, to go and summon Olokun, the god of the sea, from his subterranean castle. Olokun appeared majestically at his portals, dressed as best as he could, only to find, to his utter shock and total disbelief, that the messenger, the chameleon, the messenger of Olorun, was dressed exactly as he was. So he went in a second time and put on even finer apparel and had the same baffling experience. He went in a third, a fourth, a fifth, and at the 7th and last time, Olokun put on what nobody, not even Hollywood, could come up with in terms of finery, only to behold that the messenger was dressed exactly as he was. And so Olokun gave up the challenge, saying that if the messenger of Olorun could match him in his finery, then there was no creature, no god anywhere who could come anywhere near the Supreme Being. Now, some of these divinities or Orisha are associated with features of the environment, such as mountains, rivers, rocks, etc. But these are only the habitats or the abodes of the gods, and must not be confused with the gods themselves. For as spirits, the gods have unlimited mobility and can come and go at will, and are not confined to their recognized places of abode. Unlike the Supreme Being, who has no priests or priestesses or temples or shrines set aside for his worship, the divinities have trained priests and priestesses who serve at their shrines. these servants understand the language of the gods and interpret it to their devotees. The priests and priestesses are also believed to be able to influence the gods to comply with human wishes on some occasion. The Supreme Being, however, cannot be controlled or even cajoled, and the general lack of ritual specifically directed to the Supreme Being is a sign of the acknowledgement of the powers attributed to that particular being. But on the whole, the gods have more power than human beings and can act to advance or promote the welfare of human beings in accordance with the objectives and desires of society. The divinities also observe the actions of human beings and uphold the established set of customs which regulates relationships and prescribed modes of behavior which enhance the survival of society by rewarding those who keep them and disciplining those who depart from such established rules by inflicting misfortunes, sickness, or even death on them. The gods and other spiritual forces, such as witchcraft and magical forces, are held to be accountable for the presence of evil or misfortune and other inexplicable happenings in society. Occupying a position lower than the divinities are what are called the Esumang, that is, man-made religious objects, which derive their power from the gods or the spirits of plants and trees. The concept of the human person, continent-wide, that one experiences is that the human being is a combination of immaterial or spiritual substances as well as material or biological substances. But a person is not a divided entity, and the unity of human personality is a fundamental assumption in African thought. The material part of a person dies and disintegrates after death, but the spiritual part survives. Let me just give you one example of this concept of the human person from my own tradition, the Akan in Ghana. The most primary and fundamental part of a person, the very source of the person's life, is called Okra, which comes direct from the Creator and is the part of the Creator in every person. The Okra is given to a person before birth and links each person directly with the Creator. What distinguishes human beings from animals is the Okra, because animals do not have Okra, only human beings do. The Okra is the bearer of one's destiny, and it returns to the Creator after death to give an account of its earthly existence. There is also the Sunsum, which is an intangible element in human beings. It is a spiritual substance, if you will, which accounts for the character, disposition, and intelligence, genius and temper of a person. Unlike the Okra, which is constant and unchangeable, the Sunsum is capable of being changed from a position of being weak to that of being strong. The Sunsum is believed to be able to leave the body during sleep and may or may not return to its owner, depending on what happens to it on its journey out of the body. The Sunsum also is the main actor in our dreams. For when a person dreams, we explain that it is the Sunsum of the person which goes out of his body to engage in those experiences which the person remembers on waking up. In the case of those who are witches, it is the Sunsum of the witch which goes out of his or her body to engage in all the nefarious things attributed to witchcraft. Furthermore, the Sumsum is also the spiritual cause of illness. For when a person fills his or her head with thoughts or feelings of anger, hatred, and jealousy, these thoughts are believed to press and encumber the person's Sumsum and make the person sick. And so therapy at the traditional shrines or at the traditional healers always begins with a conversation aimed at alleviating the pressure that is on the Sumsum. Not only individuals possess Sumsum, nations also possess Sumsum. And a good example of this comes from the Ashanti area, where the Sumsum of the Ashanti people is believed to be resident in the golden stool, which was commanded from the skies during the reign of the king Osei Tutu. Beyond the Sumsum, there is also what is called the Ntoro, which, unlike the Okra and the Sumsum, is inheritable. It is transmitted by a father to his children and accounts for their inherited characteristics. The Ntoro of a father guides a child up to the time of puberty, after which the child's own Ntoro begins to assert greater and greater control. Nevertheless, the Ntoro of the father never completely leaves the child. The Ntoro establishes a spiritual bond, very strong spiritual bond between the father and his child, and this spiritual bond balances the physiological bond that binds the child to its mother. The last component is the moja, or blood, which comes from the mother and is the basis of the child's clan affiliation. The moja, which a child receives from its mother, also provides a religious link and an unbroken continuity with all the child's matrikin. Originally, there were 7 clans among the Akans. In the course of the ages, there are 8. A human being, therefore, is a combination of several factors, spiritual and material. The Okra, the undying part of the person, comes directly from the Creator and is the bearer of one's destiny. The Sumsum, an intangible element in a person, accounts for one's character, disposition, and intelligence, while the Ntoro, a spiritual gift from the Father, helps to account for one's inherited characteristics. The blood, which is transmitted through the mother, gives one his or her status and membership within the lineage and clan. All these factors combine to make a person what he or she is and specify distinctly his or her place in the universe, linking him or her with the spiritual world as well as the world of nature and of humans. Nature is believed to have its own power, or even spirits, but not all of nature is dealt with as a spirit. For there are natural causes which are recognized to be at work in nature. In such occupations as farming, fishing, raising of animals, and other economic activities, for example, knowledge of natural causes plays an important part. Nevertheless, there is an African notion of reality which recognizes, or which goes beyond naturalistic explanations, and which recognizes essences which lie behind the visible substance of things. An African writer, writing about nature, the concept of nature, had the following words to say: when an African offers an egg to a tree or food to a dead ancestor, he is not expressing ignorance of material substances or natural causes, but he is expressing in conduct a theory of reality, namely, that behind the visible substance of things lie essences, or the powers which constitute their true nature. Those who have read Western philosophy are familiar with such formulations. But because the African does not formulate his problems in terms familiar to the Europeans, or may not even be able to express his awareness in words, his conduct is often grossly misinterpreted. In Western metaphysics, the known world is divided into two, mind and matter, and a human being into soul and body. Some have said that matter alone is real and mind is an illusion, while some now hold that both mind and matter are structures composed of more primitive stuff which is neither mental nor material. The African has not offered learned and divergent disputations to the world in writing, but in his expression in conduct of awe and reverence for nature, no less than in his use of natural resources. He demonstrates his own epistemology. I am not aware of an agreed Christian view of nature, but I submit that there is an African one, which is that nature has power which may be revered as well as used for man's benefit. End of quote. All the power in nature is subordinate to the Supreme Being from whom it ultimately derived. Animals and plants are believed to have spirits or essences, and those whose spirits are powerful enough to cause harm to human beings need to be propitiated. Animals